Hi, welcome back to African Perspective. My name is Zelda. Today we're going to be talking about Botswana. The reason we're talking about Botswana today is precisely because I've been looking through economic sectors in Africa, trying to hint out where the gems are. The pun is very much intended, but I ended up falling across or like coming across the Mines and Minerals Amendment Bill that was proposed a few months ago in Botswana. And I thought that this would be such a good example to use to talk about how, as a continent, we can increase local ownership of our own resources. I know typically people say, oh, Africa is so rich in resources, Africa is so rich in minerals. But the question is, what are we doing about it? It's not really going to matter if we own all these resources, if we own all these, I don't know, diamonds and copper and gold and all these things, and we're not the ones using them. So we're going to talk about what Botswana is doing. We're going to see other countries like Burkina Faso, South Africa, countries that are also like leaning towards nationalization of their mining sector. And then we're going to see what are the caveats, what are the benefits, and then we're going to relate it to the entire continent and see what implications of these types of bills are, because this bill has not been passed yet. It's still under talks, so we're just going to have a look at that. If that sounds interesting, stick along, subscribe, and hope you enjoy the video. So mining typically contributes over 10% of the GDP in multiple sub-Saharan African countries. So if you look at countries like Botswana, countries like South Africa, countries like the DRC, Zambia, Guinea, mining is a very, very heavy sector. I know typically when we talk about Africa, we're talking about agriculture, we're talking about, to be frank, it's usually just agriculture, but mining is also a very key, which it's very funny because mining and agriculture are very, very related. I'm going to complain later on in the video about how people just mine and they leave potholes and they don't care about the implication that has on the soil, or how people use toxic chemicals to like acid mining, and how they end up leaving toxic materials that harm the fish in the rivers, that harm crops. But we're not going to get into that yet. So basically, oh, this is just for me trying to set up the ground that mining is such an important topic that we shouldn't ignore. So in Botswana, somebody recently proposed, someone in the parliament of Botswana, it doesn't matter who it is, somebody proposed that currently, so there's a system in Botswana where if a company comes in and they're trying to mine, the government is like, sure, go ahead. But whatever value you make from the minerals that you take, the government has 15% that it can take from whatever it is that you've taken out of their ground. I know this sounds very, very grade 5 level, but I had to break it down for myself for me to understand. So a company comes in, they mine, and then the government is like, cool, give us 15%. But sometimes, apparently, the government doesn't do that. They don't take the 15% off. They can, but sometimes they don't. I don't know. I don't really know why you wouldn't do that. But so somebody recommended that in instances when the government doesn't take its 15% off, the people have access to take 24%. So it's not just like I would walk up into, I don't know, a mining company's office and be like, I'm a person, I need 24% of what you earn. No, but there are systems like through working with like pensions, like a lot of people on pension schemes when they retire later on, but then they can opt into having a stake into whatever a mining company was able to get out of their country. I hope that was clear because I feel like I just mumbled on and on and on. However, in that instance, more people in the country, you know, Botswana is a fairly small country geographically speaking, but also population wise, it's roughly 2.2 million people. But it allows more people in the country to have local ownership into the mining sector, because the average person, like, let's be honest, if even though Botswana's GDP is roughly between $7,000 to $8,000. I think it was 8,000 in 2022, but now it's roughly 7,200. Even then, it's a fairly high GDP, but this is encouraging its people to take part in such an important economic activity. But then I started looking to how Botswana rose up to where it is today, and I found out a couple of things that I think are very interesting. Number one, so Botswana's mining sector is very much reliant on diamonds. They have other things as well, but it's very reliant on diamonds, which take up 80% of their foreign exchange exports. And this started in the 1960s, but it boomed in the 1970s, and it's transformed Botswana from like a regular low middle income country. I think when they got independence, the average like the GDP per capita of the country was roughly $60, and now they've been all the way to $1,000. I know you can argue for like inflation and all of that, but it's beyond that as well. And there is something called Botswana in Botswana, which is very unique actually because I haven't seen it anywhere else. So De Beers is a company in South Africa. It's a South Africa British company, which is considered to be the leading diamond company in the world. So De Beers and the Botswanese government joins together and they have 50-50% ownership. So De Beers Botswana, they made Botswana. And so that has worked out really nicely for them. But it's not often the case in Africa where you see a company and the government joining together and then having 50-50% ownership, and also the government having some sort of like a say that is respectable. Oftentimes you see foreign countries coming in, foreign nationals, foreign investors coming in and then just settling themselves in as if they belong in that country. I'm not going to complain too much because there is something to be said about balancing local ownership and foreign investment. But I think my qualm or my complaint with the mining industry in the African continent right now is that the everyday African person doesn't really benefit from the minerals at all. So, like, I live in the UK right now and I've worked in retail as well in selling like literal diamonds. And in my mind, I'm just like, I don't know of any Tanzanian who owns a diamond. Isn't that funny? And I think I'm a little bit offended just because the minerals are from our land and they get the people working to mine the minerals actually, like the people who are actually in the ground, are typically Africans, but they don't get to benefit from wearing the final products. Like, I don't know if it's something like a diamond. You don't typically see, at least in Tanzania, I really don't know of anybody who wears diamonds every day. Like, they have diamond rings and I've really never seen it. Maybe I just come from a poor part of the country. But it's not just that. But we also don't get the revenue. So even the government taxes the people who are mining, but we don't get the revenue. And so to me, seeing Botswana come up with a bill like this is very encouraging because it's like, okay, somebody has recognized that we're not having a stake in the mining sector. And then this is just one of the ways to introduce the daily, just like the regular Botswanese person into their own mining sector. And so I think that's very interesting. And I think it's a really, really good take. Although there are weaknesses as well. So one of the complaints that people have is that, okay, I'm not gonna like be very rude to Botswana, but generally speaking, people say that, and what does people say? Actually, I'm just gonna be bold and say it. Africa is very corrupt. It's very corrupt, like very, very corrupt. Not every leader is corrupt, but a lot of them are. I'm not gonna name any names because I don't wanna get in trouble, but very, very many leaders in Africa are very corrupt. So that is one of the concerns that people have with the Botswana Mines and Minerals Amendment Bill is that if people are actually allowed to tap into the mining sector by having a stake, like the 24% stake, there are people who try and like maneuver and like play the system. And again, the everyday person is not going to benefit from that. It's instead going to be the really rich people in the country. So that is a genuine concern. However, I don't think that that is a fear that we should have. I mean, I'm not Botswanese, but I think if Tanzania were to do that, I would definitely be tapping in. But I don't think that's a fear that should stop us into trying to nationalize, not fully nationalizing, but having nationals of a country in Africa have more stake into the mining sector. And part of the reason I'm very concerned about this is that I mean people are concerned about also not just that we don't have the funds to be able to like take control of our mining sector. Like we're very poor, which is very funny to me because people get taxed all the time. Like Tanzania taxes its citizens quite a lot, and in my mind, I'm just like, where does that money go? Where exactly does that money go? Because it's not taken back into the country. So they tax us every day when you get paid your salary. I mean, I don't get taxed because I don't work in Tanzania, but you get taxed if you work in the country. You get taxed if you own a business. You have to pay like tiny, tiny things when you send money through mobile money, you get taxed. And that is not being reinvested back into the economy. And so my concern is, so when we say we don't have capital to nationalize the mining sector, what do we mean? Where did the money go that we're taxing people from? Especially countries with high taxation rates. But that's one point. But the other point that I personally am concerned with is if this is a conversation that we're beginning to have as a continent, because I know Burkina Faso is also doing something similar. Do we have the institutions to be able to nationalize? So I think this happened in Zimbabwe post 2000 when they started nationalizing the mining sector and their output dropped by 30%. And to me, I've said this in one of the other videos. The video, if you want to watch the video, go ahead and watch it. I will link it somewhere, either here or here. But it's the video where I talk about IQs and why people think Africans have very low IQs. And my argument has always been that we're not stupider than the regular person. Africans are not stupider than the regular person. However, some of the things that we do make people think we're stupid. So in my concern with like nationalizing the mining sector would be, do we have the institutions, the foundation to be able to handle this by ourselves? Because then somebody else is going to come in and be like, you know what, when we gave you the chance to handle your own minerals, you weren't able to handle your own minerals, so you might as well just handle them for you, because when we handle them, we have greater output. That's a genuine concern that people, I mean, that I have. I'm not going to speak for everybody else, but that's a genuine concern that I have. And I think that could be part of the reason why this bill is also being delayed. I mean, for sure, if it was in the Tanzanian parliament and I was a member of parliament, I'm not, am I manifesting? Maybe I'm manifesting. But if I was in the Tanzanian parliament and somebody suggested something like this, I think one of my greatest concerns would be, do we have the capital, like I said, but do we also have the institutions to be able to handle nationalizing something as heavy as mining? So I've rambled on and on, I've just jumped around, but I think the greater implication for the continent is that, I mean, the greater implication for Botswana is that people will get to, like I said, have like a, put their foot in the door. And that would be a nice thing for them as well, because then that's one of the ways that they can get back what the land has given to them naturally. Like, it's not our fault that we're a rich continent. But then my concern in general with this bill in particular would be just what I just said. If Botswana as a country has the institutions to be able to later on be like, okay, we had a foot in the door by the bill, but then later on they should be able to like take control over their mining sector and be able to do something for themselves. But that is pretty much what I wanted to cover today. But then beyond that, I think I wanted to say the other reason I am very pro nationalizing the mining sector. I want to be very careful with this because I'm not a national. Am I a nationalist? Maybe I actually don't know. I'll give you a think. But the reason I'm pro Africans taking more ownership of their own resources is partly because when other people take control of our resources, they don't really care about us. They really don't care about us. So when you hear about things like cobalt mining in the Congo and how children are being employed, not even employed because they don't get paid, they're just forced. It's forced labor, it's child labor. And even if they're not children and they're adults, they're not getting paid properly. The working conditions are absolutely poor. I'm not going to put the videos up because even looking at the videos or thinking of the videos just disgusts me. But it's people cramped into this like potholes, and they just, Congo itself produces like 70%. 70% of the cobalt that we use globally comes from this one, it's not a tiny country, but one country in Africa. And to me, it's like, I'm pro nationalizing the mining sector in Africa because that means we'll get to have a say in who is employed, the working conditions. Not that we're going to do any better, anyways, because I have seen Africans employing other Africans and still not paying them well enough and still employing children. So, but I think at least it will be in our control what we do with our resources, not somebody else having a say. So that is part of the reason. And I looked into other consequences that the mining sector pushes on to like the entire continent. So I looked at multiple countries. I looked at illegal mining, for example, in Ghana. I think it's called Galamsey. So it's unlicensed miners. And the biggest concern, I think I mentioned this early on, is using dangerous chemicals like mercury, and this pollutes the rivers. The rivers that I looked at here are Pra and Ankobra. I hope I'm mentioning that correctly. But it leads to toxic chemicals being in the water. So people can't use the water. Fish die. You can't use it to irrigate any crops, any farms. And so the implications are catastrophic. It's not just about the societal or social concerns about child labor and labor laws, but it's also environmental. And again, will Africans do better when we're in control? Hopefully, hopefully. In the DRC Congo, I already mentioned cobalt and coltan. I mean, I didn't mention coltan, but the main concern in the DRC, and hopefully I get to do a video about the DRC as well, is that children are being employed. Children are being used. they're not being employed. You can't employ a child. It's wrong. And in Zimbabwe, diamond mining in Marange, there was concerns about abuses as well. There was concerns about smuggling, and of course, concerns about corruption. In South Africa, I think I heard of a story a couple years ago about a mine collapsing in South Africa, and this is very common, in the sense that when non-African countries come from wherever they come from. I'm going to name a random country, let's say Canada, for example. They come from wherever they came from. They come into an African country, they set up a mine, and then once they're done, they just abandon it. And then later on, the locals are like, you know what? If they found minerals there, we might as well go and have a look. They go have a look in the mine, and then the mine collapses, and then you hear, oh, 100 people died in a mine collapsing. We have to pull out dead bodies. Or sometimes they can't even pull out the dead bodies because it's a mine who's going to go down there and it collapsed anyways. So that is a genuine concern. Again, do we have the resources to be able to take over our own mining sector? Maybe we do, maybe we don't. But the I mean, in Tanzania as well, unfortunately, I love my country so much, but Tanzania just, whew, sometimes I just, anyways, I'm out of words just thinking about it. But I mean, I'm wearing a Tanzanite, and Tanzania is known for Tanzanite because it's the only country that produces Tanzanite. Then it's also a big concern because, like I said, like if you think of the everyday Tanzanian, what are they getting from the country being able to produce Tanzanite? It's one of the rarest minerals as well, but what are we getting as a people? Yeah, very, very sad when you think about it. But again, I think this bill is a positive sign. It's a good sign that we're headed towards the right direction as a continent, which is a good thing. We have to start somewhere. I mean, there's a Swahili saying that goes like, "Atamboyo ulianza kama mchicha." It's like even a baobab tree, which is massive, started like a tiny spinach plant. So we are not going to get this right the first time that we do it, but I think it's a good thing to already be moving towards nationalizing more aspects of the mining sector until we can properly run them by ourselves. So that is all I have for today. I think my biggest takeaway is I should do a video on copper mining in the Congo because I've watched several documentaries. So I think I'm not gonna make a promise because I made a promise last time and I didn't keep it. So, but if that's something that you're interested in, say it in the comment section. Maybe, no, if actually somebody says in the comment section, if you've even listened to me for the last, is it 18 minutes, and you have stuck by and you want me to do a video on cobalt mining in the Congo, I will do it. Even if one person says, do a video about cobalt mining in the Congo, I will do it. I promise, and I'll keep my promise because I've actually read it already. I just need to put it down into notes and then be able to do it. But that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I welcome any feedback, any comments, any subscriptions. I'll take them. But yeah, thank you so much, and you will see me in the next video. Bye.